So guys, I don't know if you can see the bottom of my screen. I think you know where the red hair comes from, at least.
It's a secret.
It's a secret. So that was my dad's mom. Her name was Stella Kabb, Esther. And she was from the East End of London. So she was around a long time. She survived World War One. She survived World War Two. I remember chatting to her brother Tony that lived till 99. He died, I think, a week or two shy of his 100th birthday.
Jeez.
Kind of like Prince Philip and the Queen Mother. You know, and the thing of it is, Uncle Tony said that because he went grey prematurely. How did he go grey? Is because as a boy, some of his hair went grey because they were doing the Blitz after the war. I think the Second World War, after he did the first. And he was in, I think, his 20s or his 30s. And from the sheer shock of all the blasts or whatever, patch of his hair went grey overnight, literally overnight. It stopped creating pigment. So I don't know if you can imagine living through World War One and World War Two. And then my gran met my grandfather after her first husband got killed in a train accident. They said my dad's half brother was Sephardi and a Cohen, and we Levium and Ashkenazi. So that's quite interesting. Our first cousins, and when she was born, they were lighting on horseback the gas lamps in England because there was no electricity. Can you imagine going to that? To being around in the year 2000s when my brother's kids were born. Can you imagine seeing that much technology?
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
And now South Africa's gone back to lighting gas lamps again.
Yeah, we have. Thank God she wasn't allowed to see that. The regression of this. All right, let's start the Gemara share, but she was a wonderful human being, really. And a Cockney accent. Yeah. All right. So I tell you what, Kev, shame you were tired last night. So I'm just going to give you a 2-second summary quickly.
Please. I actually didn't watch the video. I didn't have a chance to watch the part that I missed.
It's not a problem. It's a couple of sentences. Okay. First sentence is there's two opinions. There's Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva said that if an ox is worth a manna, which is 100 zuz, Gordon ox that was worth 200 zuz, and the carcass is worthless because the attacking ox is a tam, the damaged party actually owes only 100 zuz to the 200 zuz worth of damage. For two reasons. A, the damage was 200 zuz and it's halved because it's a tam ox. And secondly, the attacking ox was only worth 100 zuz. So it's the capacity of the damaging animal up to its body's worth. So then in this case, because the math works out, all that happens is the injured party takes the live ox. So Rav Yishmael says that that's not the case because the merciful one is instructing the court to sell the ox. Okay, and until the court does so, it remains the original owner's property. That's the fact. But Rabbi Akiva holds no. That's not the fact. That the merciful one is instructing the damaged party and the damager to work together to sell the ox, and they teach that they considered partners in this arrangement. Why? Because they both read the biblical verse, they shall sell the live ox and divide its money. So they shall sell, that's what Rabbi Akiva says they're partners, and they shall sell is Rav Yishmael's definition of the court, meaning the plurality of the court, of the judges, or to sell the ox. Okay? So how do we know how to remember, Kevin? Is that Rabbi Akiva says that the transfer of the ox, or the selling of the ox, say if the amount doesn't work out exact, they still sell it immediately and the damaged party gets reimbursed immediately, and then the damager gets to keep his share. Or alternatively, in this case, they might want to keep the actual live ox. Do you know what I'm saying? Because he had a working animal, and he might not want to shech the live ox. If it's a pure swap, he might want a working animal. So in that particular case, how do we know that Rabbi Akiva says at the time of the accident or the goring that you swap? I remember that Rabbi Akiva's name is shorter than Rabbi Yishmael. Yeah. So Rabbi Yishmael is a longer process before you get paid. And Rabbi Akiva is a shorter process before you get paid. That's the secret of how to remember it. So now that we've discussed that, we're going on to what is the practical difference. This is just a summary, guys. The practical difference is where you have the damaged party. So the damaged party is the injured party. If they if they consecrate the ox that they've received, Rabbi Akiva then says, listen, it's valid because it was immediate at the time after the goring, before the trial, that the damaged party got paid the ox, because the damage of the attacking ox is worth, his body is worth the same as the damage that he owes sustained because of the carcass. So in that particular case, because the transaction happens immediately, I'm the damaged party and Arthur's ox damages me. We make that transaction, he owes me only 100 zuz because even though my ox was worth 200, it's a Kamma ox. His attacking ox is a puny little thing, just so happened to get my ox in the heart. Good aim, puny animal. Once it's done that, he just hands over his ox to me. When he hands over his ox to me, then I can consecrate it at the temple immediately. With Rav Ishmael, it's not such a straightforward story. The answer is it's not so straightforward because why? The trial hasn't taken place yet. But now that we understand that, so according to Rav Ishmael, it's not consecrated because the court has to determine where the ox goes to, and in fact, is it the ox that there's a lien on, or is it just that amount, and it's almost like what you call a security deposit. So Rav Ishmael said it's not consecrated. Rabbi Akiva said it is consecrated. Let's move on. Rava inquired of Rav Nachman, if the damager, now we're talking about not the damaged party consecrating the ox, the one that did the damage. If the damager sold the ox, what is the law according to Rav Ishmael? So in this particular case, Arthur's ox damaged my ox. Now Arthur wants to quickly recover his cost. So what does he do? He sells it to Gavin the buyer. Okay? And as that's the case, we're saying that according to Rabbi Akiva, obviously you can't do it because the transaction was meant to take place already. But say this was done before the trial, between the actual act of goring and the trial, that Arthur sold the ox to Gavin. What's the status there? So there's two opinions. Rabbi Ishmael said, "Does the what's the case here?" Because in fact, it hasn't transferred ownership, Kevin. Why hasn't it transferred ownership? Because the court date hasn't happened yet. Only the incident happened. So according to Rav Ishmael, do we say that since Rav Ishmael said that the damaged party is considered the damager's creditor and has a claim against him only for the payment of money, it follows that if the damager sold the ox, it is sold. So what this one opinion of Rav Ishmael is, this is what Rav is asking Rav Nachman, is if the transaction hasn't taken place, all there is an owing of money. So the damager is actually a creditor and he's got a payment only for money. So therefore, Arthur can technically sell it to Gavin. Why? Because Gavin can get money and then I can get the money as the damaged party. Okay, that's fine. But what happens if you say that something slightly different? What happens if you say in that particular case that since the ox itself is under lien to the damaged party, it's not in the damager's power to sell it? So we're still on the opinion of Rav Ishmael. We're just saying, Kevin, that even though Rav Ishmael, the case hasn't taken place yet, what is the status? Do we say that Arthur just owes me money, and then when he sells the ox to Gavin, Gavin gives him the money and then he pays me? Or do we say that because it's a Tam ox and that Arthur's paying a leniency? Why is Arthur paying a leniency? A, because he only owes half payment damages, and because of the leniency of the animals. So, Kevin, let's say that that the damage was a 400 zuz ox. My ox is a 400 zuz ox. and Arthur's ox was 100 zuz. Okay, so then it's time. So then Arthur owes. Kevin, are you with me?
Yeah.
Your eyes are closing. Are you okay?
I'm a bit tired, but carry on.
All right. So what I'm saying is as follows. Arthur, your ox now is worth 100 zuz. Okay. My ox is worth 400. But you slam danked. Your animal hit my animal in the heart. Animal down, dead animal. Now you technically owe me time payment, which is half of that, which would be 200. It's further reduced because your animal attacking was puny, only worth 100 zuz. So now this is where the argument comes in. Because you got a further leniency on the body of the attacking animal, that leniency is only because your animal was puny. And therefore, according to that argument of Rav Yishmael, before the court date happened, is that there's actually a lien on that particular ox, since you were treated much more mercifully and you paid much less money than you owed. So therefore, there's a lien on that ox exactly. That's the proof of it, according to the one opinion, which means is in that case, the sale is null and void. Now, if there's a lien on the ox, Gavin doesn't have a claim, according to that opinion. Why? Because it's public knowledge that there was a goring and there was a lien on that particular ox like an apotiki. Generally, on movable property, the reason that there's no lien is that it can be easily hidden, so you can't prove that in fact you owe it. Because I'm going to say you owe me money as a creditor. You've got this movable property. I saw you had a pair of sheep and you had a tractor, and I'll say to you, what sheep, what tractor? I can sell it under your nose. That's why there's generally not a lien. It's different with an apotiki because a slave is distinguishable. He can give his own testimony. It's known in the community that, especially if it's a Jewish slave, even a non-Jewish slave, that at the end of the day, it's the person you're dealing with. And it's distinguishable, just like if there was a public incident at Kosher World where there are two cars that in an accident would be known. But generally, movable property doesn't have a lien on it because you can hide it under the person's nose, because one ox looks like another, and you can sell it quickly. But because there's a lien on this particular ox because it's come, and that's where Arthur, as the damager, injured me, is getting a leniency. In that case, Gavin doesn't have a claim. Why doesn't Gavin have a claim as the buyer? Because you have to check, Gavin, with all slaves that you buy or any property, fixed or movable, if there's a lien on it, or if it's an apotiki for whatever reason. Does that make sense? Because the buyers beware, as the Latin phrase goes. So in that particular case, Gavin can't have a claim because of the public knowledge that of the incident. It now becomes an apotiki. So Gavin's only got a claim, according to Rav Yishmael, in a case where I'm a normal creditor and Arthur owes me money for the damage, but the ox is just to be able to assess on the court date, and that's it. Or there was a pre-assessment, etc. But in that case, that is possible in this case. Why? Because we're talking about a case where the half payment damage isn't further reduced by the weight of the animal, Gavin. That's why this case is so pristine perfect. That's the only reason you can have these two opinions. The minute there's a further reduction by the animal's body, the two opinions don't come into play of Rav Yishmael. They can't. Does that make sense? All right. All right. So we're presently up to date. I'm going to tell you where we're going forward now. Read on. The Gemara cites a related brisa. Okay. Rav Tachlifa, the Westerner, taught the following brisa before Rav Bahu. Okay, well, you must know that in the Babylonian Talmud, whenever they refer to somebody as a Westerner, it means they come from Eretz Israel, because Eretz Israel was west of Babylonia.
Okay.
Just on a side note. So, what did Rav Tachlifa, the Westerner, teach Rav Bahu? He said, if he sold the live ox, it is. Just one thing before we go to this other thing. I need to explain to you with regards to the selling process. There is something I left out. We did do in revision. What's this argument? Because Rav Nachman had to respond to Rava. Rava basically said there's two different brises. The one brisa is If the damager sold it, it is not sold. And he said, if the damager sold it, it was sold. So he said, I need you to basically come to terms with these two contradicting prices. Okay? And it's not sold if there's a lien on that actual ox. Okay? It's not sold to you. But if there's no lien, it's sold to you. So we're saying, well, how does Rav Nachman reply? He said, indeed it is sold, but if the damaging party can go back to the buyer and collect it for payment for his loss. So Rava asked, but since the damaged party can go back and collect it from the buyer, in what respect is it sold? Now it's only talking about the case here where there's a lien. When there's no lien, once it's sold, it's sold. But in the case where the lien, what does Rav Nachman mean if it's sold? If I, being injured by Arthur's ox, can go back from you, Gavin, and say, that's my ox, there's a lien on it. So Rav Nachman says it's sold in the sense that with regards to plowing. What do we mean in regards to plowing? It's a general term. In other words, Gavin bought the ox in good faith. He is penalized because he should have checked that there was a lien on the ox or it was an apotiki. But I can't now charge Gavin further for having worn out my ox with plowing or used it for rent, even though it was my ox. Okay? Why? Because if a thief that means bad harm decides to get a clear conscience and return an ox, we don't charge him for the use of that ox. Here, Gavin bought it in good faith. It's bad enough he's losing the ox because he never did his due diligence, but we don't have to charge him rental for the ox that was mine. Does that make sense, Gav? That's what we say.
So he gets, at least he gets some benefit, the buyer, even though he was careless. He gets some benefit.
Yeah, he lost his money, but at least he got plowing his ox for 2 minutes before he lost that ox. That's correct. So, in this particular case, we're saying hang on a second. Shall we learn from this that if a person borrowed money and then sold his movable property, the court can collect it from the buyer on behalf of his lender? And we're saying, no, you can't do that. Because generally in the case of movable property, if Kevin owes Arthur money, Kevin's a creditor, okay? Then in that particular case, no, Arthur's a creditor, Kevin's a debtor. He owes Arthur money, okay? Then all of a sudden is that Kevin sells all his stuff to Gavin. It's movable. And then Arthur goes to Gavin to collect. There's no lien on that movable property. Why? Because it wasn't involved in a public incident like public damage where it became public knowledge. Something can only become an apotiki if there's a public acknowledgement. So public acknowledgement means a slave can testify in court, becomes public knowledge, or the fact that a human being is transferring ownership is very significant. It's not like an animal that's got indistinguishable features. So in that particular case, the general rule is with movable property, there is no apotiki on it, especially with regards to animals, and there's no lien on that because what can happen is Kevin sell it under Arthur's nose, even though he owes him money. That's why we always make a lien on fixed property, because it can't disappear. The land's always there. Kevin might sell the title deed to Gavin, but Gavin can always approach him on that. Arthur can always approach Gavin on that land. Arthur, are you awake?
Yeah, I'm just tired as well.
Just letting people fall asleep during a share. Most days.
Is that better? You can't say
no,
I'm
Arthur, it's not better.
Checking.
It's just like every day, everybody falls asleep in the share. It's just happening. It's not.
I'm sorry that it's ragingly hot here and we're sitting in a nice hot office, but otherwise, yeah, I'm fine.
All right, so the reality is fun. Now that we've mentioned this case of movable property, okay.
Damon, is there ever an exception where a leaned ox can be sold? It's never. It's untouchable. It's untouchable, basically.
Well, when it's fattened up and no longer lean, we'll see.
So it's if there's a lean means untouchable. There's no exceptions. There's no.
Yeah, lean means you have you have a claim to that particular ox.
Like preferential creditor.
Yeah, you have a claim only specifically with a tam ox because it's on the body of the ox that payment needs to be made. So that's the one exception, Damon. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In other words, A, it's a public incident about the goring. Number two, it's the fact that there is a lien on that ox because it's on that ox that you pay a leniency. I made a pun on the word leniency.
Yeah.
But the thing of it is not in this case. Why? Because the half payment damage equaled the exact weight of the ox. So that might mean on this case there's no particular lien because that ox didn't result in a reduction in payment. Does that make sense, Gav, in this perfect case?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on, guys, because we've done this for a while. So Rav Tachlifa, the Westerner, taught the following brisa before Rav Baihu. If he sold the live ox, it is not sold. If he consecrated it, it is consecrated. So these seem like contradictory statements. So we're trying to see who sold what. Are we talking about the damaged party or the damager? In other words, it'll always make sense for one but not the other. Why? If you can consecrate it and you're the one party, you can't sell it if you're the other party. If you can sell it because you're the one party, you can't consecrate it because you're the other. It works in opposite because you're either the damaged or the damager. Let me explain. So why do we have you say if it's sold, it's not sold, but if you consecrated it, it's consecrated? Who sold the ox? If you say it was their damager that sold the ox, in what case, who's the damager here? Arthur. Arthur's ox attacked me, my ox. Arthur, your ox attacked my ox. So we're saying, if we say that you sold the ox before you paid me, right?
Okay.
It is not sold. Okay, so that makes sense so far because that is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who said the ox is automatically transferred to the damaged party. So according to Rabbi Akiva, it's not sold. Why? You have no permission to sell the ox to Gavin because at the point of goring, you immediately owe it to me. Okay, that makes sense as according to that. But the Brice's latter ruling, if he consecrated it, it is consecrated, concurs with the opinion of Rav Yishmael, who said that the ox should be assessed in court. Okay, so accordingly, it's contradictory. So if we say, if he sold it, it's not sold. If he consecrated it, it is consecrated. We're saying, let me just turn off my phone. All right. So what we're saying is there seems to be an opposite opinion, Kev. What we're saying is if Arthur damaged my ox, he has no right to sell it to Gavin because he immediately owes it to me. Okay? But as far as consecration is concerned, if it is consecrated, if he consecrated it, it is consecrated. That's with the opinion of Rav Yishmael. Because if we're talking about the damager, Rav Yishmael said the case hasn't occurred in court. So Arthur, as the damager, as the owner of the damaging ox, that's what we say, the damager, he can consecrate the ox because it's his. Okay, because according to Rabbi Akiva, he can't sell it because he owes it to me at that point of the goring, after the goring. But according to Rav Yishmael, Arthur can consecrate it because it's still Arthur's ox until the time of the trial. So here, when we're speaking about the damager, there's a contradiction. Why? Because it's saying here, if he sold the ox, it is not sold. Which means that, fine. If the damager sold the ox, it is not sold. How could that be the opinion of Rav Yishmael? Because if he sold it, it is sold. Arthur's still the owner. The trial hasn't taken place. There's just a lien on the ox. It's not mine yet as the damaged party. So it's saying in what way can it not be sold and yet it can be consecrated by the damager? That's the contradiction. Then we say, okay, so maybe we're talking about the damaged party. And we're saying if he sold it, it is not sold. And we're saying, whose opinion is that? Rav Yishmael, because that makes sense. I can't take Arthur's ox and sell it yet. Why? Because the court hasn't awarded me that ox. But according to Rabbi Akiva, if it's consecrated, it is consecrated. That doesn't make sense either. Why? Because Rabbi Akiva says the transfer takes place exactly at that point. Hang on, guys, I've lost my recording. I just want to see why. Arthur, you're still recording?
Yeah.
All right. So what we're saying here is that there seems to be a fundamental problem, because according to Rabbi Akiva, the damaged party can consecrate the ox. Why? Because at the moment the ox is mine, so I immediately can consecrate it. But it contradicts Rav Yishmael in a certain way, because Rav Yishmael said if he sold it, it is not sold. Because as a damaged party, I've got no way to sell the ox. It's not mine yet. So we're saying, listen, whichever way you look at it, whether you're looking at it from the point of the damager or the injured party, either way you're going to have a conflict between Rav Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Why? Because if a statement makes, if it's sold, it's sold, if it's consecrated, it's consecrated, it would work. But you can't have one saying if it's sold, it's not sold, and if it's consecrated, it's consecrated. Because it would either work for one opinion with Rabbi Akiva and the other one with Rabbi Yishmael. So what, guys, have I got you up until this point before we go further?
I'm fine.
I'm getting a bit, because it's, why should consecration take precedence over sale?
So, in a way we're saying that, but in a way we're saying, listen, there's two ways you can look at it: the injured party and the damager. So if we're saying first, we're saying we don't understand. The statement is as follows: if it is sold, it is not sold. If it's consecrated, it is consecrated. So if we're saying we're talking about the damager, okay, in other words, Arthur's ox attacked me. If it's sold, it is not sold. That is according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, because Arthur can't sell his ox now as the damager, because the ox is mine, the damaged. So if it's sold, it's not sold. It works according to Rabbi Akiva for that statement, but it doesn't work for the damager according to Rabbi Yishmael, because the thing of it is the damager, if Arthur can sell the ox until the trial. Why? Because if Arthur's seen, according to the opinion of Rav Yishmael, that he only owes me money, why can't he sell Gavin's ox? He can. So we're saying, hang on, there's a contradiction. If we're saying there's a damaged party here, which is me, and we're saying if it is sold, it is not sold, we're saying that that makes sense according to Rav Yishmael, because I'm not entitled as the damaged party to kidnap Arthur's ox yet until the court date. So if I sell it in the meantime, it's not sold as the damaged party. But if it's consecrated, it is consecrated as the damaged party. That would work according to Rabbi Akiva, because I immediately, as the damaged party, can consecrate Arthur's ox because it's now mine. So either way, you've got a contradiction. So we're saying, how do we overcome that contradiction? Let me just quickly read it to you. Actually, the Brisa deals with the case where the damager sold the cow and its rulings are unanimous. So that's unusual. So if the damager, if Arthur sold the cow and its rulings are unanimous, how can it be? Because we can see that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael have a different opinion. It said it's unanimous in a limited sense, meaning the ruling, if it is sold, it is not sold, is true in a limited sense, even according to the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. Why? Because since the ox is under lien to the damaged party, it can't be sold outright because the damaged party can always collect it from the buyer. So what we're saying is they're unanimous, if you go according to Rabbi Yishmael's opinion, that it's not just that Arthur owes me money for damaging my ox. for killing my ox, but in fact, Arthur got a leniency based on his ox being tam. Okay, maybe not in this case, but in a case where he'd owe 200 zuz and his ox is only worth 100, then he owes 100 for sure then. But even if it all equals out, that he owes 100 zuz because it's half the 200 zuz, or the ox that attacked is only worth 100 zuz, either way, there's a lien on that specific ox, and Arthur cannot sell it to Gavin until the trial has taken place. Otherwise, when the trial has taken place, means I can take it from Gavin. Okay, so in that way, even Rav Yishmael, opinion that explains Rav Yishmael's saying there's a lien on the ox, would agree with Rabbi Akiva, that the damager can't sell it. And why did Rabbi Akiva say the damager can't sell it? Because it's mine, the damaged party. Okay, good. Now, let's say, how is it that they're unanimous according to if it's consecrated, it is consecrated in a limited sense. So we're saying because of the principle of Rav Abahu. And Rav Abahu said concerning a Mishnah which teaches that if a person consecrated property that was under lien, he must redeem it for a minimal payment and only then can the creditor collect it. This is a decree that was instituted lest people say that Hektesh can go out of its consecrated state without redemption. So in that case, if Rav Abahu said this principle, it means that if the damager consecrated the ox, in other words, Arthur quickly wanted to take it to the temple and consecrate it before he owed me the money. So then in that case, even according to the opinion of Rav Akiva, he must give Hekdesh with a minimal payment, like a token payment, in order that I, the damaged party, can collect it. But Arthur must pay that tiny payment, not me. And when I say it's a tiny payment, it's a payment that it wouldn't affect him to hold it in ransom. Okay?
Okay.
And then obviously, if it's consecrated, it is consecrated. Makes sense according to Rabbi Yishmael. Why? Because it's still Arthur's until the trial takes place. Does that make sense? And even if you want to hold like Rabbi Akiva, that it immediately becomes one the damaged party, and Arthur sneakily went off to consecrate the ox, it means that I can still take the ox, but that Arthur still owes a token payment. Because the token payment means that Arthur said, I was going to give money in lieu of this ox, and in that particular case, here's the money. So it redeems the ox. Because we can't come to a false conclusion that something that's consecrated can go out of its consecrated state without redemption. Meaning you can't back out of what you were going to dedicate to Hashem. So you have to give a financial equivalent. Now, if the ox was unblemished, then in that case, Arthur would owe the full amount to the temple. Because why? Not me. Or he would owe the full amount and then I would get that amount. So in other words, I'm owed the ox. So Arthur now says to the temple, this ox is worth 100 zuz. I'm dedicating this ox to the temple. Then I'll come and I say, listen, I'm entitled to that ox back. Now, in that particular case, the temple would make Arthur pay 100 zuz because that ox is unblemished. If Arthur's ox is not fit for the temple, then he only has to give a token payment to redeem it, and I, as the damaged party, takes back the ox. So in other words, if Arthur's the damager, quickly sneaked off to dedicate his ox for consecration, and I came and I'm owed the money in time, the temple has to give it back to me, but Arthur has to give it a token payment if it's an unblemished state, meaning it's not fit for sacrifice. But if it is fit for sacrifice, Arthur has to give that full 100 zuz to the temple because he made a promise. Okay, does that make sense, guys?
So, wait, no, not 100% clear. Just does he take the ox and give the temple 100 zuz?
No. Arthur owed me the ox immediately according to Rabbi Akiva. Okay? Well, according to Rabbi Akiva, he owed me the ox. He had no business taking it then. So then for sure, if I have to go get that ox back. but Arthur still has to put a couple of tikkies or a couple of shekels to redeem that ox. Because you can't promise something to the temple and then not fulfill it. But that Arthur only gives a minimal payment if his ox is in an unfit state for sacrifice. However, if the temple found that Arthur's ox is in a perfect state for sacrifice, Arthur's got a problem because he made an oath. So now he has to give the full, apart from me taking back my ox, now has a full account to owe for the temple 100 zuz.
Why does he owe the temple? Why doesn't he owe you the 100 zuz?
He does, Gavin. I'm saying he owes me the money.
Oh, that's not
He owes me the ox. He did something naughty. What did he do? So I still get my ox back from the temple. I get it back. I mean, if it's consecrated, Arthur owes me the money. But I'm saying if it's not yet, I take it back. But Arthur still has to make a redeeming payment to the, he can't hold the ox to ransom and say, I'm not paying the token. They give me the ox back anyway. But he owes the temple either a token payment, in other words, for an ox that they found is in an unfit state for sacrifice. Somebody can think the ox is fine, it's not, so they have to give a token payment, at least something for hekdesh, consecration. But if they found that Arthur's ox would have been fit for sacrifice, now Arthur's pledged that 400 zuz. I can take back the ox, but he must still pay it. He was naughty, it's still my ox. But then he owes that equivalent now to the temple. Does that make sense? Yeah, Arthur shouldn't have done it. But Rabbi Akiva said the transfer immediately came to me, and Rabbi Ishmael said there's a lien on the ox, so you can't consecrate it because there's, on that particular ox there's a lien. It might be until the court date. There are opinions of Rabbi Ishmael that said he's just a creditor. But those opinions that said there's a lien on the ox, I'm still entitled to, as the damaged party, take back my ox, whether it's immediately or at the time of the trial. But Arthur still either owes a token payment to redeem that ox, because he promised the ox, but it turns out the ox wasn't fit for consecration. Or if it is, now Arthur owes the full amount of the ox to the temple in monetary terms.
Do you get your ox back then?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that's
absolutely.
Important.
The fact that he was naughty, the fact that he was naughty has nothing to do with the.
I couldn't understand why you were paying the temple. So the nominal amount you're paying because it's a
I'm not paying it. Arthur's paying it.
No, Arthur's paying. Arthur's paying.
Yes, I get my ox back.
I'm talking from Arthur's perspective.
A small amount, or for the full animal if it was fit for sacrifice. I'll get the ox back immediately. He owed it to me, so that's perfect.
What happens if the ox has been sacrificed or something like that? Then you got a problem.
Well, then you get the financial equivalent.
Financial equivalent.
No, cash, yeah. Which is why we use choice property for muad anyway.